Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Today, John Benedict, Director of Cybersecurity Enablement for TRIMEDX, and Stefan Goldberg, VP of Sales Engineering for Metagate, will discuss the ways that TRIMEDX and Medigate have partnered to deliver a solution that enables you to get ahead of issues with your medical and IoMT devices, so you can strengthen your cybersecurity efforts and maximize the value of your assets. Based on innovations in real-time clinical network visibility, you now have a fully integrated solution that can help you close the remediation loop and understand how devices are being used to optimize their utility. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Metagate. Metagate is the industry's first and leading dedicated IoT, IoMT, and clinical asset management platform, enabling providers to deliver secure, connected care. With Metagate, hospital networks can safely operate all medical devices on their network, enabling the deployment of existing and new devices to patients while ensuring privacy and safety. For more information, please visit metagate.io. Let's give one lucky attendee the opportunity to win a Webinar Wednesday Webinerd t-shirt by answering the following question. In what city is the research and development headquarters of Metagate located? You can find the answer on our sponsor's website, and you can answer by using the questions feature on your webinar dashboard. A few reminders before we get started. In 2.5 weeks, the MD Expo will kick off in Tampa, Florida. We are thrilled to bring this one-of-a-kind conference back to the HTM industry. MD Expo Tampa has been approved for up to 13 continuing education units by the ACI. Register online at mdexposhow.com. If you are unable to join us in Tampa for the MD Expo, be sure not to miss our December HTM Mixer in Nashville, Tennessee on December 9th and 10th. Please visit htmmixer.com for more details on this event. As always, today's webinar is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI. You can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. More details on this at the end of today's webinar. We will wrap up today's presentation with a live Q&A. You can submit your questions anytime during the webinar by using the questions feature on the webinar dashboard. We will get through as many attendee questions as time allows. As I mentioned earlier, our speakers today are John Benedict, Director of Cybersecurity Enablement for TRIMEDX, and Stefan Goldberg, VP of Sales Engineering for Metagate. John, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today. And really appreciate being here along with Stefan Goldberg. We've worked very closely together for the past couple of years, and we're very excited about the partnership that we have between TRIMEDX and Medigate. Stefan, do you want to say hello to everybody, and then we'll get started with some slides?
Sure thing. Nice to meet you, and happy to be here with John. As I was presented, I lead the pre-sale and tech alliances team with Medigate, working closely with John throughout the past 2 years, I think, already, forming this partnership and the joint offering that we are going to present today. John, I'm on slide 3 right now, identifying trends. Back to you.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So, yes, we've been working together for over 2 years now, Stefan. And what we did is we started to identify some trends in clinical asset management that were really related much more closely to cybersecurity. And we set out to basically solve these 5 problems that you see here. And, first and foremost that we're seeing is the uptick in threats and attacks over the past couple of years. In 2019, we had, I don't know, something like 4 or 5 times more attacks than the sum of the previous 3 or 4 years dating back to WannaCry. And we've seen this just you know, 150% or more since COVID began back in March for all of us. And you know, that's one of the things. So what attackers are after is patient information on medical devices or to disrupt care. So that's becoming a huge area of focus. A couple other trends that we're seeing are, you know, transitioning of care, and COVID has escalated this as well, expedited this to move out of, you know, into more of a traditional, out of a more traditional inpatient setting to an outpatient setting. And along with this, connected medical devices that are now connecting through personal networks and guest networks and, you know, wearable technology. And what we really found is that we needed to help our customers to be able to see these devices and to be able to understand how they're behaving and when they're being threatened. So this was a natural match for us with Metagate, as they, you know, their deep contextual knowledge of medical devices, it was top notch for us. And to bring this together, you know, two large companies like this, to be able to bring this together, you know, both technology and services at a price point that neither of us could do separately, to bring a more comprehensive together offering is really key, because as you can see, and I'm sure everybody's experiencing with COVID, profitability is tough for all of us right now. And then the last area that we wanted to touch with is talent. There is a huge shortage of cybersecurity professionals, and especially cybersecurity professionals with healthcare experience. So, you know, we're bringing on board and training people with both clinical engineering expertise, cybersecurity, and IT infrastructure, and leveraging the technological advances that Metagate brings forward with our partnership. So with that, I want to pause. Stefan, is there anything that you wanted to add there, or is there anything that you're seeing in those 5 trends that you want to speak to from Metagate's behalf? I think you might be on mute. I'm not hearing you.
Yes, I was on mute.
Oh,
thank you,
sorry.
John. Yeah, absolutely. I want to echo the surge of connected devices, especially now with the pandemic and the distribution of healthcare to the edge. The clinics, telemedicine, more and more devices are getting connected to the network as all healthcare. So that's definitely an opportunity from a functional perspective, but also a threat from a cybersecurity perspective.
Great, thank you. Will you go to the next one, please?
Sure thing. Slide
so
4.
as we, thank you. So as we looked at the strengths of both organizations and the services that we both provide, and those 5 challenges that we just spoke about, we thought about all of the different ways that we can help out and the things that are important to our customers. And the first thing that we found was there was a lack of a really detailed connected device inventory. You know, Metagate is able to give us, you know, dynamic IP addresses, and they're able to tell us every time that changes, where in the past, even though we had a really good inventory, and even if we were collecting MAC addresses, the IP address is changing so often, we just can't keep up with that because we don't touch these devices every single day. And that was a really big win for us in terms of just being able to see those devices and see them change and see them move around the hospitals and what access points they connected through. The next thing is really, you know, we talked about with the trained personnel. So putting people with not just the technology, because if you have just a tool, that's great, but it's going to give you a bunch of work orders and a bunch of things you need to remediate. So we found bringing people to the table that had both expertise, and we trained them in using the Metagate tool, and they understand the medical devices. They were able to really work almost as a quarterback with within the hospitals to help them. You know, if it needs a patch, great, TRIMEDX can do that. If it needs segmentation, then they can work with the Metagate tool, and Stefan will show you some of that stuff as we get into the demo. And if it needs a compensating control or something from the network side, they know exactly who to work with at the customer to, to make those changes and make that happen. And I won't go through every single one of these bullets. Everybody can kind of read those on their own, but having a tool with real-time visibility that filters out all of the noise, that the one key difference from a technological perspective for us when we talk about filtering out the noise is something that I've already said in terms of the deep contextual knowledge. For us, that's what set Metagate apart. When they're seeing medical devices talk to one another, they weren't alerting on normal traffic. They weren't false identifying devices as, things that were not medical devices. They were just really, really accurate, and the contextual knowledge, so they weren't having us chase after alerts that were normal, I'll just say configuration files or backups, etc. So not having us running after that stuff was a huge advantage. And what it really ultimately leads to is helping us manage the clinical assets through their whole life cycle. And we're able to identify when devices are high risk, as well as combine with our benchmarking in terms of clinical asset management. And we're now making recommendations about devices that are near the end of life and a cyber risk, and we're running out of parts. And so bringing all of that data together in one place through one offering is kind of what we set out to address with these challenges. Stefan, I know I didn't talk to all those bullets, but is there any that you wanted to pick out and address in detail?
No, not really, John. You're spot on.
Okay, and let's go to the next one.
Yep, slide 5. So
really, this slide is here to show you that the scale of what we're bringing as TRIMEDX. We've been around a long time, and we've been in the hospitals working alongside the clinicians. We are in 3,700 plus hospitals. 92% of the equipment that's in use today, we have a device profile on. And so when you think about that and marrying that data with what Metagate sees and learns in real time, we were able to increase, their medical device profile library overnight, and they were able to increase our threat intelligence overnight. And so, when you look at that, Metagate also does a lot of really great work around the FDA recalls. So TRIMEDX, we manage them, and we'll go out and do the work or facilitate the work to make sure it happens. But we're now seeing these alerts in real time, so we're comparing multiple sources, the tried and true sources that TRIMEDX has done and will continue to do forever, as well as the automated sources that Metagate brings. And when we're seeing something like 19 new average cyber threats a month, that really scales to a customer's, even if you have 1,000 medical devices that are connected to the network, chances are any given month you're going to have at least a handful of them that are impacted by a current never seen before threat or zero-day exploit. And that's really just wanted to share with you the size and scale of what we bring with TRIMEDX and Metagate together. I'm sure there's new devices that'll be added every day, but there's not many out there that we don't have a profile on, that we don't know how they should behave. All right, is there anything you wanted to add on that one, Stefan, or do you want to go on to yours?
No, well, I think it's a good note to present Metagate. Metagate is a cybersecurity startup kicked off in 2017, and quite a few months into the road, we partnered with TRIMEDX and started working on this joint offering, understanding early in the process that what we were aiming to do is to secure anything that is connected on the hospital's network. And I guess most of the participants in this webinar know that the weakest link of those HDO networks are clinical IoT or IoMT devices, namely medical devices, because of their sensitive nature and the inability to install any third-party software on them. And with that said, them being inherently vulnerable coming from the manufacturers. They were not built to be secure, they were built to be functional. And that combined with the converged network of a hospital creates this unique challenge. And this is why we decided as a company out of the gates to be committed to this domain, to the healthcare domain. And we do feel that that was a very good strategic decision, as we were successfully created a solution that is healthcare contextualized and is unique in the space, and successfully provides unique value to our customers, especially when partnered with a suite of services and solutions like TRIMEDX that can complete the data that Medigate sees and generates from the network with the human touch of the clinical engineering service, providing anything between managing the inventory of those devices, maintaining them, patching them, and taking care of the whole life cycle, basically. As said, we did start a little over 3 years ago. Currently, we are deployed over in over 2,000 healthcare facilities throughout the world, mainly focused on North America, USA, and Canada, but also have some significant deployments in the European region, as well as Japan. Medigate's offices are located, we are headquartered from New York City, and our main R&D and product management office is in Tel Aviv, Israel. As for the solution itself, the platform, and let's touch upon that. On the right here, you have the framework, what we call the stack. I will not spend too much time presenting it, as we'll transition to the demo shortly, and then you'll see by yourself in detail the value that this platform paired with the TRIMEDX services can deliver to an HDO. But touching on the differentiators of what's unique in our solution, I think it starts with the data and the quality of the data. The lower level of this stacked slide, what we call visibility. Visibility, the natural interpretation is device discovery. Connecting the sensors to the network, discovering those devices passively. Passively is a key word here because of the sensitivity of those devices. That's where it all starts. If you cannot accurately discover those devices, profile them, and pick unique identifiers for them, you cannot really do the rest of deliver the rest of the value we're going to speak to. But the data quality does not stop there. As John said, it continues with behavioral profiles to be able to tell what those devices should and should not be doing on the network. It's not only about discovering them, it's also about recommending policies for those devices. Without, of course, the precision here is key, because recommending a wrong policy that is enforced on a medical device can disrupt care delivery, potentially harming patients. The third pillar of the visibility layer, or the data layer, is our threat intelligence and risk assessment capabilities. We've created a contextualized risk framework, which, by the way, TRIMEDX were a key partner and provided key data components into this framework, mainly around the severity of harm and impact of those medical devices, enriching and even making this risk management framework even more clinically contextualized. And finally, the last pillar of the data layer would be the device utilization, being able to discover and profile those devices. The tool that we developed to do this also enabled us to know what those devices are doing on the network and to what extent they are utilized. And when you quantify this utilization metrics and data, you can deliver pretty valuable insights from a revenue and cost saving perspective. So those 4 data pillars, I do think, really specify Medigate's differentiators as a product, as a platform, and when placed in the right hands, this is this can create pure value to your organization. Not only a tool, this really solves business problems. And this is what the upper layer is about, the delivered value. So the organizations or the teams that benefit from this joint solution are everyone from the risk and vulnerability managers under the information security organization to biomed and clinical engineering that service and are responsible for the life cycle of those devices, and some other organizations that are responsible for the efficiency and the operational efficiency of the hospital, which can be the COO or the CFO of the HDO itself. I'm going to transition to the next slide that John can briefly present the mutual framework that starts with Medigate's data and capabilities, but really continues with the service and the unique framework TRIMEDX bring to the table. And afterwards, we'll transition to the Medigate demo and show you the platform and some examples for this data and findings we are providing to our customers. So John, back to you, slide 7.
Sure, thank you. So I am going to try to do this briefly, but what this is, so you have plenty of time for the demo, because I think that's where a lot of people are most interested is to see how this works. This is basically representative of our ecosystem with Metagate, and our 3 pillars are clinical asset management, our clinical engineering, where we consider ourselves to be best in class, and then device safety and security. And so what we've done is taken our partnership where we have, a long service history as TRIMEDX in the clinical engineering space, and now bringing the advanced, data analytics and real-time intelligence that Medigate has. And so when we're combining that with things like national benchmarking and looking at something, let's go beyond cybersecurity for a second to the device utilization, being able to tell us exactly which devices were in use for exactly how long, how many studies, how many minutes, how many hours. I mean, the granularity is just eye-opening that we're getting here. So combining that data alone just into what we do day to day without even cybersecurity in mind has upped our game considerably. But what we're able to do from a cybersecurity perspective is now look at all those data points that Stefan just spoke about and combine, with their threat intel team and our threat intel team, looking at OEM portals, looking at all kinds of different data feeds every day, able to come up with OEM, validated patches. We're able to come up with real-time zero-day exploits that we can help alert our customers about. As you know, I think the average time that an attacker is in a healthcare system before they're discovered is something like 180 days. That's a lifetime, in our system, and we have that because we can't block by default in healthcare because we're delivering service, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But all said, all of these attributes go into a cyber risk score, and what we also consider is our AEM score, our alternative equipment management score. And that's basically considers, in addition to, is the device connected? Is it on a supported operating system? Has it seen any, unencrypted PHI, in the last 30 days or so? We also take a look at the patient safety as well as the consequence of failure to the business. And so when you look at down at the bottom center where it says the cyber risk score, that feeds into 2 different areas that really impact and drive efficiencies into the business. One is what we call the rudder score. And what we basically do is take cyber risk elements and feed that into, should the device be replaced? Should it be upgraded? Could it be dispositioned or reallocated? And taking a look at how that translates over into your fleet of 4,000 infusion pumps. We always hear our customers say, well, we need more, we need more, we need more. Well, being able to look at the risk of the devices as well as the utilization, we can give real numbers as to, well, the average customer we're finding is using something like 39% of their pumps are getting, 90% of the use, and the other ones are rarely connected to the network at all. And you can see the return on investment, how that processes out across 4,000 devices. The other area is in terms of how we can help you respond to a cyber breach. And as you know, should that happen to you, the Office for Civil Rights comes in and they take a look at everything that you're doing in a holistic, and I'll just say nothing is concrete. They look at it holistically and say, are you doing the right things? Do you have monitoring on your medical devices? Do you have somebody managing your vendors? Are you patching the equipment? Do you have real-time visibility? And so, while that expected financial loss could be as much as, I think they're averaging around $6.5 million an event these days, that comes way down when you're starting to look at the fact that you're discovering vulnerabilities and breaches earlier. And on the remediation end, we're remediating quicker, as well as, on any potential fines. Well, we certainly couldn't guarantee that. For the most part, when they come in and see that you are doing the right things, you do have systems in place, you do have people engaged to take care of those medical devices, I can only say that it should certainly work in your favor that way. And that's kind of the value prop that we're trying to drive here across the business in all three legs of what TRIMEDX does. And that's how Metagate supports us in all of those areas and makes us better, quite frankly. Stefan, I definitely want to leave you a lot of time to do the demo. Is there anything that you wanted to add on that, or do you want to dive into the demo?
No, let's show the audience how this process looks like from the Metagate perspective. So that would be a good time. Let me transition to demo. All right, so that would be the home page of the Metagate platform. As you can see here, it gives you some high-level statistics around device discovery and their threat intel and risk analytics. The top left corner, you can see the device count. What I want to point out here is, again, although medical devices is the real focus of not only this webinar, but also most of the security and clinical engineering offered efforts on an HDO's network. That's the most valuable group of devices, the most dangerous, and from a security perspective, group of devices. It's not enough to discover just those medical devices. A security solution needs to take into consideration the fact a healthcare enterprise is still an enterprise, and to discover the rest of the devices, the other devices outside of the medical space. Even to give context for what those medical devices communicate with on the network. If an MRI machine communicates with a security camera, we need to know, you need to know that this is a security camera, what's its risk, and whether it's supposed to happen or not. Of course, in this case, not. So this solution maps everything that is connected to your network. We have three categories: medical, IoT, and IT. IT being anything that is managed from a traditional IT perspective, your computers, laptop servers, and so on. You can see the device distribution from a device type perspective here. And medical and IoT being self-explanatory. Medical is anything that is defined by the FDA as a medical device, anything that has a K number or an M number on the FDA, and IoT being the facilities devices, security devices, and you will see some examples in a moment. For the other distributions here, it's just a high-level presentation of the alerts that the solution found and generated based on the data observed. High-risk devices distributed by device type, and manufacturer distribution, and what's very important to observe, protocol distribution. The way this solution works, and that's very important to state from the get-go, is passive discovery. Passive is a key word. Solutions that discover devices actively via active probing or active scans are not so relevant for those environments, as they can disrupt operations. This solution was built for healthcare, hence it was built passively from day one. The way it works, we deploy sensors on the HDO's network in strategic hubs, switches and routers of the network, and taking a copy of the traffic. We're not installed in line, but just taking a copy of the traffic, so our collectors cannot really disrupt anything but Metagate's operation. Those collectors collect traffic, IP level packets from the production network of those organizations, and analyze this traffic on-prem. No raw captures are being sent to the cloud, and this is done for two main reasons. The first one is security and compliance. We don't want to be sending PHI information as it was transmitted to the cloud. Again, going back to this was designed for healthcare. If you examine other IoT security solutions or device discovery solutions that are available, a lot of them just send captures to the cloud. This will refrain or make it very difficult to confirm their HIPAA and high trust compliance. So that's a very important observation as well. All parsing and filtering activity is done on premise on the Metagate collection appliance installed within the healthcare systems network. The second reason is technical. We don't want to blow up your network and sending gigs and terabytes of information to the cloud, but only the hand-picked metadata that those devices created on the network, and to send those. To be able to send those hand-picked segments of those devices communications, the serial number or the binary sequence in the DICOM header of a packet, one needs to know to parse those protocols. And parsing the protocols, maybe it's a bit technical for the non-network professionals on the call, but it's basically it's not only identifying the language they speak, but understanding the language they speak. Not only, oh, that's Chinese, and then I know it's a radiology device, but also to be able to understand the words, to handpick, and to be able to profile which exact radiology device that is, a Siemens MRI of a magnetome model. This capability is enabled only by parsing. And then going back again to the commitment to healthcare, we do not have any competing interests of doing the same thing in a industrial control system environment or in other OT environment or the enterprise setting. We do this solely in healthcare. This allows us just to cover all protocols and to be able to maintain the pace of the surge of those new devices, new medical device protocols, the standard and the proprietary ones, which basically delivers, I believe, an unparalleled solution from the visibility perspective. Transitioning to the devices tab, you will see a few examples of what we call granular visibility. I was speaking to DPI and how we do it, but let's see a few examples of what is that exactly that we do. So under this category of medical devices, you will see a lot of examples, namely five categories of medical devices. Patient devices would be the devices that are bedside devices found in high numbers in the hospital and managed in fleets. Clinical IoT is anything that is specific and special for healthcare, but is not considered a medical device by the FDA. A dispensing system, a medical device integrator, or a terminal server like a capsule or a Cerner connectivity engine, nurse call systems, telemedicine devices, and so on. Surgery is the devices that are connected in the OR. A very timely and actual example are the ventilators, and we will be discussing this example as well. To be able to discover them is not a very easy task as they are not directly connected to the network. You have the clinical lab, of course, that consists of the lab of the hospital, the laboratory information system connected devices. Finally, the last category, maybe where the most capital from a device perspective is invested is the big iron, the strategic modalities, the radiology imaging devices of the hospital. So let's go deeper and understand the differentiation and the ability to discover those devices. So the first example I want to show is an infusion pump, and to pinpoint a few important observations. To be able to profile an infusion pump, even passively, without profiling, without actively querying it, is challenging but possible. Not that difficult of a task. How one should do it? You should look at the Macro UI of the infusion pump and to see how it communicates over the network. So anything with a Zebra Macro UI that communicates over port 3613 to an Alaris system manager in the data center can be profiled as an infusion pump. Then you know that this is an Alaris infusion pump or an AT15 infusion pump. You have the profile. But to be able to pinpoint device-specific attributes such as the serial number, the application version, the specific operating system of the device, this is not enough. You actually need to understand the Alaris DCMP protocol and to be able to parse it and to extract those segments from the communications of the device. This is not only nice to have attributes, it is really crucial to deliver this value I was speaking about when I was presenting the stack, the framework of our platform. Let's look at one example. To be able to assess risk for this device in a clinically contextualized manner, you need to know whether the device runs an updated firmware or not, whether the device needs patching or not. Why is that important? Because if you do not know the application version of the device, you cannot passively correlate vulnerabilities to this device. Vulnerability scanning usually happens actively. You ask the device, do you do this, this, and that? Do you have this port open? Do you have this service? Try to start the vulnerability exploit, and you know the device is vulnerable. When you do it passively, without active querying, without knowing the specific application version and which application version is susceptible to which vulnerability, you simply cannot correlate vulnerabilities. So suddenly this naive attribute enables a complete use case of passively correlating vulnerabilities that is the basis of a valid risk assessment process. Let's take another example, the serial number of the device. Many of you come from clinical engineering, or most of you come from clinical engineering background. Knowing the serial number of those devices is not only a nice to have. If one wants to correlate this device to a CMMS platform, to TRIMEDX RSQ CMMS platform, the enterprise asset management that TRIMEDX use to manage those fleets of devices, knowing the MAC address is not enough. The MAC address usually, not all the time, but usually is not documented in those systems. Those systems are biomed oriented. So this IT information is seldom present, and if present, not for all devices inside the CMMS platform. But the serial number is a mandatory field. It is present for all of the devices. So the capability to pull this information from the communications of those devices, again, passively without querying them, is key to correlate this specific box to the specific record on the CMMS platform. So here we go, another example for just an attribute that is not nice to have, but really enables a clinical asset management use case. Going further, let's take a deeper look at the risk score of this device. Medigate starts from the discovery and the visibility for those connected devices, but really was built to secure them. So after you know what is connected to your network, you need to assess it for risk to be able to prioritize those devices for activity, cybersecurity activity, which we'll touch upon shortly. The risk assessment is broken down into three categories: device vulnerability, network connectivity, and severity of harm. The severity of harm part is where we work closely with TRIMEDX to give more clinical context to the risk of the device. A device with a consequence of failure, potential patient death, of course, will have a higher severity score than a device that simply might affect data integrity or a wrong diagnosis of a patient. Those three categories, the device vulnerability and network being the likelihood portion of the risk score, and the severity of harm being the impact, are assigned with a score. Those scores can be seen here on the diagram on the right. And And those 3 scores are used to generate the overall risk score for the specific device. Having a risk score for the device is nice, is important, but you really need to do something on the hospital level, not on the specific device level. And this is why we created the risk overview together with TRIMEDX, that this information can be aggregated on the fleet level, on the hospital level, to properly prioritize actions to mitigate this risk. And we'll touch upon this shortly. The overall risk score is a normalized score between 0 and 100 that we generate for on the site level and on the healthcare system level, just to benchmark and compare yourselves with other organizations. And the bars on the right here is what we call the risk factors. Those risk factors are the attributes that are used to calculate risk for those devices. The color of each one of those bars represent the impact of each one of those risk factors, the impact from a device perspective. And the height of those bars represent the quantity and the score, the blast radius of those devices. Clicking on each one of them, let's take vulnerabilities, for example, you will have a breakdown per vulnerability for each one of the vulnerabilities that we passively correlated for those devices. And then you can go further. And for example, of course, for each one of those, you have the score for if you patch this vulnerability, how your risk score improves proportionally in an overall manner. But what's more important and more actionable, not only to being able to prioritize that, but also to click on the specific vulnerability in a single form and to have the list of the susceptible devices that request patching or remediation for those vulnerabilities. If I did open it up for questions now, probably half of you would have jumped at me and asked, so what do you do when you do not have a patch? And unfortunately, this is more than common. This is the majority of cases. And for that case, we go back to the stack, to the second component of the behavioral profiles. And instead of remediating vulnerabilities and risk, we mitigate risk via network-centric approach. This is why this bar is the highest bar. And we have here a deployment of Medigate's recommendations for access control policies. I want to go back to the Infusion Pump example and to speak to this component here. For each one of the common medical devices and IoT devices on your network that we'll discover, we'll present a desired behavior in an ACL format, access control list. This is more an IT security or network security component that will be used to enforce policy on this device. What will essentially happen is that this device's communications will be narrowed down to those specific rules, permissions, in a manner that this device's functionality will not be affected. We will not touch the device itself, but only its gateway to the network. This ACL will usually run on the wireless LAN controller or the access switch that the device is connected to. Here, it's very important to state again, the healthcare focus and us working only with those devices in healthcare HDO environments allow us to create those recommendations, not in a machine learning fashion of generalizing what we've seen, but rather applying dedicated research with understanding of the workflows of what happens if this ACL is applied to this device. What is this DCMP protocol? What happens if we deny scanning activity for this device? And asking all those questions. Partnering with TRIMEDX, of course, and their huge resources and knowledge around medical devices not only accelerated this process, but in part also enabled it. Moving on to the bottom part of the specific device page, you can see the network behavior of those devices, and this you can call it a network map or a Sankey flow diagram for the communications of the device. On the left-hand side, you have the device itself. On the right-hand side, you have the destinations that this device communicated to. And here in the middle, you have a breakdown by application and protocol. This is not something that Metagate said should happen, this is what actually happened in your environment. So a very easy way to take this recommendation and to compare it with what actually happens on your network. You can validate our recommendations before you roll it out and enforce policy with observed communication on the traffic. So wrapping it up on the specific device before we transition to other examples, yeah, it all starts with discovering the device to the granular manner, like the specific to the box on the application version, the OS version, the serial number. Using this data to prioritize risk and to power the overall healthcare system level of remediation and mitigation action. Patch what you can't and mitigate risk from a network-centric perspective where you cannot patch. That's the name of the game, and that's the framework. And I think this first example shows it in a pretty good manner. I do want, before I open it up for questions in roughly 2 minutes, I want to bring 2 more examples. One around a radiology device. I would like to show you how analyzing the risk on the specific device level can be very actionable. So again, we have discovered this nuclear medicine device with all its versioning information, names, serial numbers, AE titles, and so on, and assessed the risk of the device to be high. What you can do on the specific device level, when you think, okay, what should I do with this high-risk device? I have 200 high-risk devices. Each one of them, we need to have an action plan. You can click and use the risk simulator, clinical engineering along with information security, because one of the functions of the main goals of this tool is to bridge the gap between those 2 organizations, the ones that are concerned of the risk and their job is to mitigate and lower the risk from all perspectives for the hospital, and the ones that are responsible for those devices from a functional perspective. So sitting together and using this tool, one can calculate the risk. What happens if the device is patched? If the vulnerabilities are remediated by patching the device with its newest Windows operating system. And on top of that, you can enforce Medigate's access control list, the recommendation, and see how this affects the risk score. And with those 2 actions, remediation of vulnerabilities and mitigation of what you cannot patch from a network-centric perspective, you lower the risk from a device from high to low. So it's simulated what your action will actually do to your risk posture on the specific device level. This is generalized for all devices through the previous screen that we viewed, the risk overview and the recommendations here. So that's a very good and actionable example I wanted to cover. The last example from a discovery and fleet management perspective, I did mention the COVID-19 case and the ventilators. So when all this started, our customers asked us how we can help, and we developed a few important integrations with medical device integrators, those gateways, the capsules, the Cerners, the IC Ronas of the world. And now we are capable to provide visibility not only for the network capable devices, the anesthesia cards, but also to the devices behind them that are connected serially to those terminal servers and so on. So you can see that those ventilators are not connected directly to the network. Their IP address has a weird slash and the MAC address states parents MAC. So if I go to the relations of the device, you will see that those ventilators are connected to a single Axon terminal server in an OR, or in this case, a larger facility. And instead of identifying just this network capable device, which is important, it is an important component on the network and to secure it and assess risk, we're capable to see behind it, to what's connected behind it, not to an Ethernet port, but serially to this specific device. And I do think that this capability also speaks loudly to our healthcare focus and the unique differentiator of being able to provide this level of visibility. I do think this covers the visibility and risk portions to a great extent. We have multiple more security and network-oriented use cases and features that allow planning network fault policies, rolling out segmentation projects with matrix-like views for the ones of you coming from the IT security space, working with frameworks like Cisco TrustSec or Palo Alto firewalls for east-west tagging, and so on. Very extensive reporting capabilities, up to 50 CAN reports. Each one of them can be filtered and customized to the relevant filter that one would like to see on their network. Filter for medical, IT, or IoT, and many other features that, due to time constraints, we cannot present today. And on this note, I would love to open it up for questions from the audience.
Hey, Stefan, if I can add just a couple quick things before we do, and I promise I'll be really brief. So, what you've seen is a demo of the Metagate platform by itself. One of the things that I want to point out to everybody is that we also have a deep integration with Metagate, where all of this data also shows up in our informatics platform that combines our benchmarking and utilization and clinical asset management, et cetera. So just want to make sure that everybody understands there's a whole nother level of data that you see in the TRIMEDX informatics portal with the Metagate integration.
Absolutely. Coming on top of that, as you've seen, the risk score that we provide is really cybersecurity oriented. What TRIMEDX will provide on top of that is this broader framework with additional clinical engineering information that is pulled by their services teams and simply cannot be pulled from the network, because those devices do not communicate this kind of data. So those two pools of data, the one from the network and the one from the clinical engineering service provider, combined together really gives you not only an unparalleled risk assessment capabilities, but also a service to remediate and mitigate the risk. Thanks, John. Very valuable comment there. So I think this is the cue to thank you and to open it up for questions.
Thank you both for all of this valuable information. We do have a few questions that have come in from the audience. As a reminder to the audience, if you would like to ask a question, please use the question function on your GoToWebinar dashboard. Our first question that has come in is, we've seen a number of different risk scoring tools, and none of them seem to fit medical devices. What makes your cyber risk score different or unique?
Wow, is that one for Metagate or TRIMEDX? Because we both have different ones.
Yes.
Go ahead, Stefan. Why don't you go ahead first?
So yeah, I'll just recap what was already presented. I do think that those vulnerability and network components really speak to cybersecurity, but the impact and the severity of harm speaks to the healthcare focus. So having FDA class type for all devices, equipment class, consequence of failure, knowing the cost and the cost avoidance for each one of those devices, whether they store and transmit PHI, really speaks to the context that we have put around this risk framework. Of course, assessing a security camera will look differently than a medical device. We did not cover that portion due to the time constraint, but I do think that this presents the healthcare focus. John, I do think I brought up the router score slide up again. I do think that
Sure. Okay. So, a few things that we add into the mix as well. So with our 30 years of service history, we track things like, does it have open cyber vulnerabilities? Does it have open FDA recalls against it? And then we look at our AEM score that I talked about briefly before. All of this, though, we scrub against basically CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System v3. And so we try pretty much to focus on high or critical vulnerabilities because otherwise it would affect like almost every device in your environment. And we're moving towards kind of figuring that piece out. But that's how we do it. And we have slightly different flavors, but we use our combined data together in our integration to present things that we feel no other joint offering can bring forward.
Great. This one is for Stefan. When it comes to installation and integration, where do these scoring tools connect into our network?
So the installation of the sensors only ingest network traffic, so namely configuring a span port on a switch or connecting it to a physical tap that is connected to your switches and network. That is from a physical perspective. Roughly said, it will be one U appliance per site. So it's like really nothing from a hardware perspective, really easy to deploy. Literally 20 minutes to an hour physical work, and then 2 additional hours just on the configuration side. And that's an average case, not the best case. From an integration perspective, so besides integrating with TRIMEDX's information system, we integrate with the IT stack and services suite of the hospital, MDM solution, DHCP, and SNMP collectors, and so on. And we have various integrations for various use cases that we can speak more to in a different occasion.
Thank you so much. We are out of time, but thank you for a fantastic presentation. A reminder to our audience that any questions that were not answered will be sent and answered after the presentation. I would like to encourage everyone in the audience to visit today's sponsor, Metagate, to learn more about the products they provide to our industry. Please visit metagate.io. A quick reminder that you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. The survey will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you will be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. We will be back next week with another webinar. Visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and complimentary registration.